I can't make the argument that it's a lot better off than it looks. It may not be
Mm,
as bad as the doom people think it is, and it's all going to fall apart. I mean, um, the employment is clearly getting softer. Consumer sentiment is clearly slowing down, but the airline data, people boarding airplanes is still pretty healthy. It depends on kind of where you look. And one thing
mhm.
that's really holding it up is all this AI spending on data centers and electricity power and, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we're spending billions and billions of dollars in CapEx to build out the AI network. And the other thing that's holding it up is just the stock market and the wealth effect of the stock market continually hitting all-time highs. I mean, I must say when Trump came out and said, we're going to put these massive tariffs on, and the market took a 15% spill, I thought, all right, that's it, it's over. This is the bubble popped, and yet here we are. And
Yeah.
people just bought the dip because they've been trained to buy the dip, and there's a lot of capital sloshing around out there, and so people, there are a lot of carry trades going on, and someday these carry trades will end, and someday buying the dip I don't think will make sense because the dip will be bigger than they can solve. But so far that day hasn't arrived. And so, I think my last quarterly letter, which is available on my website, came out, and I talked about how, it's possible that what we're seeing here is kind of a crack up boom, where everything is going up, including the stock market. And that's, gold's going up, Bitcoin's going up, stock market's going up, bonds are, flat. They're not falling apart, but they're flat. I think they will be going down eventually, but they're kind of, I mean, and one of the things that I think happened since you and I last spoke is, and this happened a month or two ago, recall that they came out with those and they said, we're going to cut 2 trillion, which was a joke. Then we're going to cut one. Oh, well, maybe it's 150. Well, I've looked at the numbers now and it doesn't even look like they're going to get the 150. No doubt they cut some silly programs and they saved some money. I give them credit for that. But in the context of a 1.8 to 1.9 trillion dollar budget, it's not that much. And then the big beautiful bill comes along and adds, depending upon who you believe, between 200 and 400 billion dollars a year in expenditures, and defense spending goes up. And so, it's interesting to me the way the Trump administration pivoted from we're going to balance the budget, make America great again, to we're going to grow our way out of this. And honestly, there's an argument that says they really do have to do that. I mean, the way to get out of a debt spiral where you've got more debt growth than GDP growth is to amp up the GDP growth. But and the healthy kind of GDP growth would be based on productivity. But the other kind of GDP growth you can amp up is inflationary GDP growth. And so, my sense is, the Fed is, I mean, and one of the things we know, and I think this is also going on in the markets. Okay, this is interesting. So we know, I mean, Trump's been attacking Powell, right? Just
Right.
ruthlessly. I mean, attacking him,
Yeah.
saying rates are too high, and Pulte, he got all these people involved, and Pulte and others involved. And what he's doing, obviously, is trying to put a lot of pressure on him, which it probably is actually counterintuitive, not going to work, because the more he pushes, the more Powell's like, screw you, I'm going to be Volcker.
Hmm.
But here's the thing: the markets are forward looking, and what we do know is that in May, Powell's gone. So the markets might be saying to themselves, okay, and even Besant has acted on this. I'll talk about that in a minute. Markets might be saying, well, okay, rates are higher than they should be right now, but we know with high confidence that in May of next year, there is going to be a new Fed chair and he's going to be a dove. And Trump said something along the lines of, we're going to take rates down 300%, 300 or 300 basis points or 3%. So that would take you from, 4.4, 4.5, whatever, down to, 1.5 or something. I mean, it's crazy. And, everyone's HELOC costs would go down. I mean, everyone's borrowing costs would go down. Borrowing would
Yeah.
explode, and so, I think anticipating all that, I think that's why everything's kind of hung together. It's funny, it's interesting too, because Besant, Treasury Secretary, when he came in, he really heavily criticized Yellen for not terming out the debt, which is to say, when rates were low, in the COVID era, she should have been selling 10, 20, 30-year bonds because the government interest costs would have been lower if she'd sold those. Now, I would argue that she couldn't sell them because there wasn't that much demand there, but whatever. She didn't
True.
sell them. She sold short-term bonds. She really tilted the whole debt refinancing game to being selling short-term bills that rolled over quickly. And people will buy short-term bills because they don't have duration risk on the interest rates. And so the Senate criticized all of that, but then of course he came in. He's been doing the same thing. doing what he criticized her doing. And my sense is he's doing that. And what happened is he got in there and he read the market and he got read in on. Guess what? There's not that much demand for these long bonds because everyone knows we're out of control on our spending. And so, in the most recent quarterly refunding report, he said, we're even going to tilt more heavily towards these short-term bonds. So I think what they're thinking is, okay, well, if we're financing the government short-term, and in the low fours, but they roll over pretty quickly. We know that we can do that, and then hopefully, what'll happen is when the new guy comes in, we'll cut rates down quite a bit, and short rates will fall quite a bit, and therefore we'll get our financing costs down as we roll over those short bills into new cheaper short bills or cheaper interest rate short bills. So that's kind of the interesting position we find ourselves in betwixt and between the old Fed regime, but what everybody pretty well knows is going to be a new lax Fed regime. And because Trump has just made it very clear. I mean, and he's not going to put somebody in there that's a hawk. I mean, he's just not. I mean, and whether Mirren is the guy or not, it's a little unclear. I mean, there's some language that said Mirren might be a placeholder until such time as Powell leaves, and then Mirren might resign. He might put somebody else in, like Walsh or whatever. But we'll have to see. It's unclear how it's going to unfold. But I think the market and particularly the gold market and the Bitcoin markets are smelling future money printing. Bond market a little bit less so. I've been kind of surprised at how well the 10-year has kind of hung in there in the mid fours.
Mhm.
That could change, but so far it's hung in. So we'll just have to wait and see. On the economy, what do I know? I just don't know. I mean, one thing that helped it more recently is when this whole tariff thing was coming through. You got a little bit of a tariff bump. Everyone's like, okay, well, if we're going to have tariffs, those are going to be inflation. That means things are going to cost more in the future.
Mhm.
Maybe I ought to buy something now. And I'll cite a perfect example of me personally. Okay. I had a 12-year-old Ford F-150 that had 130,000 miles on it. It was pretty much shit beat and close to being dead. And I use my pickup truck a lot. I like it.
Mhm.
And Trump tax thing got passed. The big beautiful bill got passed. Well, first thing they did is they said 100% depreciation. You can take all the first year depreciation on a truck or service
Yeah.
vehicle in year one. Of course, I'm gonna have to argue that I use it for business, and that may be a little bit of a stretch, but some of it I do use for business
Yep.
and carting books around. And
Right.
the second thing I thought is, this F-150, I bought the very cheap, low end model with, an 8-foot bed. This F-150 is in the, high 30s, low 40s. Even though Ford makes a lot of stuff here, I just know there's going to be more inflation in the future. This is probably a good time to pull that demand forward and buy that truck because I think in 2, 3, 5 years, trucks will be more expensive. So, and I'm suspecting some other people did the same thing. I mean, I certainly, I can't see how this doesn't push the price of all foreign cars up. You know, so and we're seeing, I mean, the fly in this ointment, Brandon, is that there's just a lot of inflation out there. I mean, it's just everywhere you look. It's in insurance, it's in food, it's in commodities. I mean, whenever I see a bad inflation report or real life compared to the two or three that they're gaslighting us with, it's nowhere near a realistic estimate of what the average person is seeing. I mean, we're all seeing much higher rates of inflation than 2 or 3%. So
Yeah. No. It's true, and that's why it's such a confusing time. Do you think that I want to touch on some 2020 style, just
yeah,
gold and silver Bitcoin run here because it feels a bit like that. But first, I want to talk really quickly about the U.S. It feels like the U.S. We were talking offline a little bit that they know what we know as Bitcoiners and hard money advocates that there's a monetary transitioning happening,
yeah,
and it seems like they are front running it, and they're trying to get ahead of that. There's obviously the BRICS, SDRs. There's different global currency competitions going on, just the government currencies themselves, and on top of all this. So,
I
what
think
kind of
that's
sense do
right.
you get?
I think
Yeah,
that's
you get
right. I
that
mean, we
sense
have
too.
to read the tea leaves,
Yeah.
and they're not saying it obviously, but if you read the tea leaves carefully, I think that's right. And I suspect, so I think they realize that we're losing our reserve currency status slowly but
Hmm.
surely. It's not going to go away. I mean, but it's
Right.
slipping. And I
Yep.
think they recognize that we have to get rid of, being the world's reserve currency because of the Triffin dilemma effect and the way it's hollowed us out. And so I think they know they've got to go towards gold and Bitcoin. And then probably more importantly, I think, and I look at Miron's writings, I look at what he said on Twitter. I think Miron and probably Besant and certainly Lutnick, I think they all understand that, the Chinese have a lot more gold than we do. And the Chinese
Yeah.
don't believe in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's the future of sound money. And so there's a very solid argument to be made that they should just, to the degree that they're going to do a reset or a reval, that they should just skip gold and go right to Bitcoin. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if politically they can do that. I don't know if they can even pull off a gold reval. I mean, Trump's got
True.
4 years in which to do it. And, you know, my conspiracy theory said that's part of the reason why all the imports from London and Switzerland into the U.S. shot up so heavily this year. I mean, let's go back a bit. Remember when they were first elected? They said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do an audit of Fort Knox, right?" I mean,
I was
there's
going to
no
ask
doubt
you
we're
about
going to do an
that.
audit of Fort Knox. Blah blah blah. Just like we're going to release the Epstein files, and I don't have to go
Uh-huh.
there.
Yep.
That's gotten really quiet. That's never happened. And in the past they said the audits are too expensive, which is just absurd. I mean, for a couple $1,000,000, you could get some good accountants to crawl all over it and figure out what you got. And they stopped that. And I think the reason they stopped that is they got in there and Besant got read in, and he went and he did all the research, and he realized that what Andy Schechtman and other guys like me believe to be true is true, which is that in the 60s, when the London Gold Pool was in existence, Johnson, and I know this because a guy who knew some of the an older guy who knew some of the Johnson administration Treasury officials told him that Johnson sent gold from Fort Knox to London to try and help the London Gold Pool, and then didn't get it back and was really pissed off. So
Mm.
while there is clearly gold in Fort Knox, don't get me wrong, it's not empty. I don't think I don't think we have everything we claim. And so my
Mm-hmm.
sense is it's possible that, Besant and Trump went to work on trying to fix that. And that's why we saw all our gold imports from London and Switzerland really take a big jump up in earlier part of this year. So, and that's also why we haven't seen or heard anything more about auditing Fort Knox. It's kind of gone silent. It's kind of like, don't look over there. So, it's unclear. It's very difficult to know how they're going to play these cards, but they're not stupid men, and they do understand the situation that we're in, and they have to do their very best to move us in a direction that gets us closer to where we want to be. And I think they're doing that with all the actions that we see. And it could result in some really big action where they do a complete reset. I mean, the problem is, some people say, well, that's fine. Why don't we just revalue gold to today's market value? Well, that'd be nice, but it would only get you, $1.5 billion or $1.5 trillion or something. I mean, to really get a big dent in the debt and get it to the place where get our balance sheet to the place where it needs to be, I mean, you got to take gold to 10 or 20,000, and that would be kind of a shock.
If you're ready for your next piece of education, go click on this video here. However, if you're ready to take action on all the education you have seen, then go to our links right below. Get your hardware wallet from Foundation, $10 off. Go get your seed phrase from that wallet and put it into titanium from Stampseed, 15% off. And then go to the Bitcoin Way. Check them out because they are going to be the team to walk you through everything.